You won't believe how one rich man destroyed a poor farmer's life in cold blood, and how karma came back for him in a way no one ever saw coming. This story has a twist so unexpected, it'll leave you speechless by the end. Now let's begin. In a small town called Willow Creek, nestled in the farmlands of Nebraska, lived a simple, hard-working farmer named Henry Cole. Henry wasn't wealthy, but his land had been in his family for generations. His life was modest, filled with early mornings, dusty boots, and the scent of fresh hay. His wife Clara and teenage son Lucas meant everything to him. But just a few miles away, in a towering mansion overlooking the fields, lived a ruthless businessman named Victor Langston. Victor owned most of the farmland in the area and was known for crushing anyone who got in his way. For years, Victor had tried to buy Henry's land, offering him deals that sounded generous on paper but would leave Henry with nothing. Henry refused every time, saying, "This land holds my father's bones and my son's future." But Victor wasn't a man who took no for an answer. One evening, during a stormy autumn night, Victor sent two of his men, Jake and Curtis, to intimidate Henry into selling. They cornered him at the local bar, threatening his crops, his home, and worse. But Henry, stubborn and proud, still refused. That very night, while the town slept under heavy rain, Victor's men set fire to Henry's barn, destroying half his harvest. Lucas, hearing the crackle of flames, ran out to save the animals, but tripped and broke his arm. The Cole family watched helplessly as the fire devoured everything they'd worked for. The sheriff, a man conveniently in Victor's pocket, called it an accident, and when Henry demanded justice, the town turned its back, too afraid to cross Victor. The insurance company, also influenced by Victor's reach, refused to pay, citing negligence. Within weeks, Henry was drowning in debt, his land scheduled for auction. Victor planned to swoop in and buy it for a fraction of its worth, but fate wasn't done with either of them yet, because buried deep in Victor's past was a secret, one so dark it could destroy him if it ever surfaced. What Victor didn't know was that decades ago, before Victor Langston became the richest man in Willow Creek, he was responsible for a fatal accident that killed a young farmhand named Samuel, and covered it up with the help of a corrupt deputy. That farmhand? Samuel was Henry's uncle, and Henry had spent years trying to find proof, never knowing the killer lived just miles from him. Until now, as the auction date drew near, Henry stumbled upon an old leather notebook in his late father's belongings. Inside were letters and a faded newspaper clipping about Samuel's death, and a name. Deputy Walt Harris, the same man still living in the town's outskirts. Henry confronted the old man, now dying of cancer, who finally confessed everything. How Victor Langston, drunk one stormy night, ran down Samuel with his car and made Walt cover it up. How Victor's rise to power was built on lies, blood, and intimidation. But Walt had kept one thing hidden all those years, a piece of evidence Victor never knew existed. An old locket belonging to Samuel, found near the crash, with Victor's initials scratched on it in panic. That locket, if revealed, would not only expose Victor for murder, but tie him to a lifetime of corruption. Henry knew this was his only chance, and as the auction loomed, he planned something bold. He contacted a young investigative reporter named Emily Hart from Omaha, desperate for a career-making story. Emily agreed to help, seeing the potential to not only expose Victor, but bring national attention to Willow Creek's corruption. But things got dangerous fast. Victor's men grew suspicious. Emily's car was vandalized. Henry received threats. And one night, Lucas disappeared, leaving only a note on his pillow that read, "Stay out of it, or he won't come back." Henry's world shattered again. Now it wasn't just about the land, it was about his son's life. With Emily's help, Henry went underground, gathering more evidence. But every step they took, Victor seemed one step ahead, until Emily discovered something chilling. Victor's own brother, Malcolm Langston, estranged for years, was willing to talk. He hated Victor for reasons even Henry couldn't imagine, and claimed he knew where Lucas was being held. But Malcolm wanted something in return: safety. and immunity from his own past crimes. Henry agreed, with no other choice, and what Malcolm revealed would shake everything to its core, because Lucas wasn't just kidnapped. Victor planned to use the boy as leverage for a final deal, forcing Henry to sign over the land and leave town forever, and if he didn't, Lucas would disappear for good. And worse, Malcolm hinted that Victor might not be working alone. Someone in Henry's own circle could be betraying him. Someone close. The clock was ticking, and Henry knew one thing. This wasn't about money anymore. It was about survival and vengeance, and what happened next would turn Willow Creek's darkest secret into its deadliest storm. The night was thick with mist as Henry Cole and Emily Hart met Malcolm Langston at an abandoned grain silo on the outskirts of Willow Creek. The place reeked of mildew and decay, but it was the only spot Malcolm would agree to. He looked nothing like his brother Victor, gaunt and jittery, with the twitchy eyes of a man who'd spent years watching his back. Malcolm wasted no time. "Your boy's alive, but he won't be for long if Victor gets what he wants," he whispered, glancing around nervously. He explained that Lucas was being held at an old hunting cabin deep in the Blackridge Woods, a remote, overgrown patch of land owned by Victor under a false name. But the most horrifying part? Malcolm revealed that Victor planned to stage an accident, making it look like Lucas had drowned in the nearby river while trespassing. With the land deal signed and Henry gone, no one would question it. Henry's blood ran cold, but Malcolm wasn't done. He confirmed what Emily had suspected. There was a mole, someone close to Henry feeding Victor information, and it was none other than Sheriff Clay Morton's deputy, Sam Dorsey, a man Henry had known since childhood. Dorsey had been on Victor's payroll for years, keeping tabs on the townsfolk and helping cover up every dirty deal. Furious, Henry demanded to know why. Malcolm chuckled darkly. "Same reason everyone in this town does what Victor wants: money, fear, and a secret too big to risk getting out." But Malcolm had one more card to play. He handed Henry a small black USB drive. "This has everything: documents, financial records, bribe lists, evidence of the cover-up from years ago, even proof Victor's been laundering money through dummy corporations in Henry's name to frame him for tax fraud. If Victor succeeded, not only would Henry lose his land and son, he'd go to prison for crimes he never committed." Henry felt the walls closing in, but Emily refused to back down. "We leaked this to the press tonight," she said, but Malcolm shook his head. "If you go public now, your boy dies before the first headline hits. We have to play this smart." Emily, though a rookie, had guts. She suggested staging a diversion, a fake deal where Henry pretends to sign over his land while secretly recording the conversation. If they could get Victor to confess on tape about Lucas's kidnapping and his past crimes, it would be enough for the feds to intervene. It was risky, but their only shot. Henry agreed. The plan was set for the next night. Malcolm would lure Victor to the silo under the guise of finalizing the land transfer. Emily hid microphones in the rafters, while Henry wired himself with a tiny audio recorder Malcolm had swiped from a PI friend. But as the clock struck midnight, only Victor's henchmen arrived. Jake and Curtis, armed and grinning. "Boss ain't stupid," Jake sneered. "He knows about your little setup." A scuffle broke out. Henry, fueled by raw desperation, managed to knock Jake unconscious with a rusted pipe, while Emily slashed Curtis's arm with a broken bottle. They escaped, but not before hearing Curtis hiss, "It's over, Cole. By dawn, your boy's dead." Panic set in. Emily called her editor, demanding backup, while Henry forced Malcolm to give up the cabin's exact location. Armed with nothing but a shotgun and raw fury, Henry stormed Blackridge Woods before dawn. The forest was a maze of thorns and mist, but Henry followed faint tire tracks until he reached the rundown cabin. Inside, Lucas was tied to a chair, bruised but alive. A single guard dozed by the door. Henry burst in, overpowered the man, and carried Lucas out into the rising sun, but their escape wasn't clean. Victor himself appeared at the tree-line, pistol in hand, aiming at them. "This ends now, Cole," Victor growled, but before he could pull the trigger, a gunshot rang out. Victor's body jerked and crumpled to the ground. Behind him stood Malcolm, rifle smoking. "Told you you'd pay for everything, brother," he spat. Sirens wailed in the distance. Emily had called the feds, and they arrived moments later, arresting Victor's remaining men and securing the evidence. In the aftermath, the town's dirty laundry was aired for the world to see. Victor Langston's empire crumbled. The sheriff was stripped of his badge. Deputy Dorsey fled town under threat of indictment, and Malcolm, in exchange for his cooperation, vanished into witness protection. Henry reclaimed his land, but chose not to rebuild right away. Instead, he turned part of it into a memorial for the townsfolk Victor had ruined over the years, including Samuel. Lucas recovered, and Emily's story won her a National Journalism Award. But one final twist remained. As Henry sorted through Victor's confiscated files, he found a document, a land deed for a property far away in Montana. Left in Samuel's name decades ago, property Victor had tried to hide. It was now legally Henry's, land worth millions. Karma hadn't just hit hard, it hit poetic. And as Henry stood on that Montana hilltop months later, watching Lucas run through golden fields, he realized, some battles are worth everything, even if it takes a lifetime. Months after Victor Langston's empire fell and Willow Creek began to heal, Henry Cole thought his battle was finally over. The town had rallied behind him. Emily Hart's expose had won national headlines, and Lucas was safe, slowly recovering from the trauma. But one cold November evening, as Henry was clearing out the last of Victor's old office records, he uncovered something that made his blood run cold. A leather-bound ledger, older than anything else, buried beneath a loose floorboard. Its contents revealed that Victor's criminal dealings went far deeper than anyone realized. Not only had he laundered millions through shell companies, but he'd also been the silent partner in a land acquisition scheme spanning half the Midwest, farmlands, ranches, water rights, all stolen through forged deeds, intimidation, and in several chilling cases, mysterious disappearances. But one name kept repeating through the entries, Jameson Rourke, a name Henry hadn't heard since his youth. Rourke had been his late father's best friend, a man Henry had believed died in a freak hunting accident when Henry was just a boy, except the ledger claimed otherwise. It documented payments made to silence witnesses after Rourke's death, suggesting Victor had orchestrated the incident because Rourke discovered the land fraud and threatened to go public. Worse, one entry mentioned Samuel Cole, Henry's own grandfather, hinting that Victor's vendetta against the Cole family had started generations earlier, stemming from a bloody land dispute involving a buried oil reserve no one knew existed. Reeling, Henry contacted Emily, who immediately agreed they couldn't leave this buried. But as they dug deeper, they realized Victor wasn't acting alone. Another name appeared repeatedly in the ledger's coded entries, Lawrence Bexley, a powerful land developer who, to everyone's knowledge, had died in a private plane crash 20 years ago, except Bexley wasn't dead. A tip from Malcolm, now deep in witness protection, revealed Bexley had faked his death and assumed a new identity as Martin Cross, a reclusive billionaire now living in a heavily guarded estate outside Reno, Nevada. Bexley had been Victor's mentor, the true mastermind behind decades of farmland takeovers across the country, and now that Victor was gone, Bexley had moved to reclaim everything, including Henry's Montana property. Documents filed under a proxy company showed an imminent hostile claim on the land, falsely alleging it was part of an old trust belonging to Bexley's family. Emily and Henry had 1 week before the claim would be approved. Racing against time, they gathered every shred of evidence, knowing the only way to stop Bexley was to expose his real identity and crimes before the land office ruling. But Bexley's reach was vast. Agents tailing them, threats left on Emily's voicemail, and Henry's truck sabotaged one night. They pressed on. Finally, with Malcolm's help, they orchestrated a sting, a fake auction at a private club in Reno where Bexley was rumored to conduct illegal land deals. Emily posed as a wealthy investor, baiting Bexley into a meeting. Hidden cameras, microphones planted by Malcolm's contacts, and Henry waiting in the shadows. Bexley arrived, older but unmistakable, and over the course of the evening, his arrogance undid him, boasting about decades of manipulation, the fake death, and how he destroyed families like the Coles because the land was worth more than their lives. It was all recorded. The moment was tense, Henry barely restraining himself as Bexley bragged about Rourke's murder and Victor's downfall. The recording made it to federal authorities that night. By morning, Bexley's estate was raided, assets frozen, and the hostile land claim withdrawn. In the aftermath, Henry was offered millions for the Montana property by legitimate buyers, but he refused. Instead, he built a foundation in Rourke's name, preserving the land as a sanctuary for displaced farmers and families ruined by the same land grab schemes. Emily's story sparked national reforms in property law, and Malcolm, granted immunity, quietly disappeared. But karma wasn't finished. On the day of Bexley's sentencing, as he was led out in cuffs, a loose balcony fixture in the courthouse collapsed, striking Bexley and killing him instantly. Some called it an accident. Henry knew better, poetic justice, decades overdue. And as the sun set over Montana's golden hills, Henry finally felt peace. One man's fight against corruption had exposed a century's worth of buried sins. Lucas grew up strong, Emily's career soared, and Willow Creek thrived again. And folks around those parts still say, never cross a coal, karma always hits hardest when you least expect it. And if you love this wild, twisted ride, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more insane revenge and karma stories, and turn on that notification bell, because the next one, it's even crazier. See you in the next story.